Good morning, everyone. My name is Margaret Anderson, and I'm the Executive Director of Faster Cures. We're a center of the Milken Institute, and all of us at the Institute are delighted to have you with us for what we know will be an exciting, thought-provoking, and action-packed 3 days. I wanted to flag for all of you that it will be a very crowded 3 days. We have many, many people from around the globe that are here with us. So I want to give you a couple of quick insider tips, a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off this amazing panel. Monday morning is always our busiest panel time, and that is especially true around the time that this panel breaks. So be aware that when the International Ballroom is taken out of commission, they will be setting up for lunch, and the other rooms then become quite full. So please just be mindful of trying to get to your panels on time, because things will sort of fill up and book up. With more than 160 sessions, our schedule is packed, so let's get right down to it. We have this morning a panel that I think all of you will agree is important to the future of humanity. And this is not just a domestic policy issue here in the United States of America. This will relate to global issues. We are going to be talking about accelerating medical research, and the title is The Bipartisan Quest for Cures. I would say it's humanity's quest for cures. We have with us an amazing group of individuals who have all committed substantial amounts of their life to working on science, working on treatments and cures, working on policy solutions, on financial access to all of this. And you will be hearing throughout the panel discussion about ways that they think we can accelerate the quest for cures. But also we're going to be giving all of you a bit of challenge as we go through the panel. No one will leave this room without a to-do on their list, because we don't want these issues to just become someone else's responsibility. I think that would be too easy, and it's a little bit of a challenge that we've faced thus far. So I'm going to start with Bob Hugen, who is the Chairman and CEO of Celgene, and he has jumped in at the last minute to help us out. Dr. Elias Zerhouni had, unfortunately, a family emergency. He's with Sanofi that prevented him from being with us today. Dr. Hugen is going to be talking to us about the work that he leads at Celgene. Then we have Sarah Radcliffe, and Sarah has recently relocated from Washington, D.C. out here to California. I think the winter finally broke her down this past year, and she's come out to California to lend a hand to the life science industry in California. So she's the president and CEO of the California Life Sciences Association. The man to my left is my boss, chairman and founder of Faster Cures and the Milken Institute, and I think a passionate advocate for all of the work that we're going to be talking about. Dr. Francis Collins, to my right, is the director of the National Institutes of Health. I have some nuggets that I'll share with you about his background along the way, but I would urge you to take a look. There was a Fox News piece that was recently aired about Francis, and I wish that I had the clip, so I won't surprise you with that, but we'll get it at some point. If I could use the sort of narrator's voice, they said, he rides a Harley and plays a mean guitar. He's the Fox Power Player of the Week. So you're going to be hearing a little bit about why that is. And then Congressman Joe Barton from the great state of Texas will be with us talking about the role that the United States Congress has played and will play going forward. And I think Congressman Barton is going to be sharing with us some of the journey that he's experienced in working on these issues. And I think the general theme is, how do we prioritize biomedical research? So Bob, I'm going to turn to you first to give us some of your thoughts, both from the policy perspective, but the company that you lead, Celgene.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Having a little bit more of an intense, compact time frame to think about these issues, I was really struck yesterday about the benefit of a conference like this, in the sense that issues are attacked from a very diverse perspective and in a holistic way, because often many of us that are committed to accelerating medical research and understand the issues and are so profoundly impacted by understanding what we need to do, that we're often so narrowly focused that we don't often step back and put things in a broader context. And I was really struck yesterday by a few things in the discussions. In one group I was in, we were talking about energy and the impact of energy, and it really struck me that we need to take this debate that we're talking about here, the important issues to our society about accelerating medical research, into the broader context. Why don't we have more of a national agenda to prioritize this in the most effective way? Because you're seeing discussions in Washington, around the country. Everyone says we should increase the budget of the NIH, and we should be doing more to do this and do this, the precision medicine agenda initiative and the brain initiative. But we're not getting the kind of traction we need to make real substantive change. And the thing that struck me yesterday was we were talking about the fiscal issues and the fiscal deficit, and there was great discussion about maybe we're looking about this issue in the wrong way in terms of the strength of the balance sheet, the energy assets that we have, and might allow us, and I think the point that I want to make is that we need to advocate on the broader issues, not just on our narrow issues, because if we're going to get people to support additional funding for biomedical research on its own, but when it gets put into the totality of the issues, if we haven't advocated on the full issues of why we should look at fiscal issues this way, how biomedical innovation stimulates the economy and has all a positive impact on that, I think that was one issue of a great benefit of this conference. And I think the two other things that struck me as we think about these topics, we need to do a better job as advocates to really have people understand the positive economic impact. And one of the great strengths of this country, and one of the reasons why, even though we're not happy where economic growth is, we're doing better than most of the developed world, is because we have the crown jewel of an ecosystem of biomedical innovation, as opposed to Europe and other places that have not had the economic strength that we have. It's because of what we invest in R&D in our country. We need to articulate that message better. And at the same time, we need the American people and leaders like us in this room and all people that are watching this to understand the consequences of the failure to accelerate research investment. When you think about the race of innovation versus the cost of caring for an aging population of Alzheimer's, metabolic disease, and cancer, which is also a disease of the elderly, we will undermine the financial strength of all developed societies if we don't find solutions and begin to invest substantively for solutions today. The American people and citizens of the developed world need to understand the consequences are real, and they're not something we can wait another 10 or 15 years to invest in. And I think to do that, we need to both articulate the problem more clearly so people, we were talking about Congressman Barton earlier, so that people don't say, that's tomorrow's problem. We've got to make the commitment today that if we're going to address those issues. And at the same time, I do think we also need a more robust national debate about objectives so that people can see the tangible benefit that in 12 years we will delay the onset of Alzheimer's by 2 years, which would save us in the health system $200 billion a year if we're able just to do it by 1 year. And so the consequences are great if we don't deal with these issues, and I think we need to take the holistic approach like we're doing here at this conference.
Thanks, Bob. Francis, will you talk to us a little bit about the sort of paradox that we're living in and that you have unfortunately had to oversee in terms of the decline of the NIH funding, but the issues that Bob is raising in terms of the peril of what happens if we don't actually wake up and smell the coffee?
Well, I think Bob said it extremely well. And again, thanks, Margaret, for presiding over this, and thanks, Mike, for bringing us all together again this year, because I think we are at an inflection point where we could either continue the gradual dismantling of what is the greatest engine for biomedical discovery the world has ever known, which is the United States, and it has been gradually getting dismantled over the last 12 years, or we could turn that corner and decide that this is a priority that deserves the kind of vigorous, creative approach to figuring out how to fund it appropriately. And I think the winds are maybe starting to blow a bit more favorably, but words are cheap. And unless those words get translated into action, the default will be that we continue this downward slide, which has resulted in a 23% reduction in NIH's ability to buy great research by the grants we send out there to all of our nation's finest universities and institutes, and all of whom depend on NIH. So the challenge, of course, is we've been in this national gridlock about what to do about our fiscal situation, and the focus has been so heavily on the fiscal deficit. Yeah, I'm glad you put up that slide, because I was going to ask, look at this, and it is a wake-up call for us, I think, to realize that we alone although Canada's kind of in a somewhat similar space, are going the wrong direction. This shows you what has happened. This was for 2012. This was pre-sequester in terms of the investments that other nations are making. And there we are in the red, going down. All those other countries basically read our playbook. They saw what happened in the 80s and 90s when the biomedical research enterprise in the US was the envy of the world, and now they want to be that too. Last year, China filed more patents in life sciences than the United States did. That's the consequence of going up by this degree of investment year after year. And if you don't think that's going to have an effect on economics, well, gosh, where do you think small businesses get a lot of their enterprise and energy? Is from those discoveries that lead to intellectual property claims. I live this crazy paradoxical life because the good news, everybody, is that the scientific agenda is rocketing forward. We have the ability to do things I wouldn't have thought possible in my career. We're seeing the consequences of that. Cancer is now dropping in terms of death rates about 1% per year. That's been going on for 15 years. Every one of those 1% drops is worth $500 billion in terms of economic benefit, but we're underinvesting in that. Alzheimer's disease, everybody should be worried about this coming severe blow to our economics with the baby boomers getting older and with the costs already at $200 billion a year, and it's going to go up. And we do see, I think, some exciting developments. The recent very tentative result from Biogen's antibody suggesting there might actually be a positive signal there. We had a great experience with a drug that AstraZeneca made available for crowdsourcing for other investigators to see if it might be useful for a different disease than it was developed. This is a drug developed for cancer. We have a program where we ask companies to make such drugs available if they're known to be safe but didn't happen to be effective. This one, just tried out by a Yale investigator, looks like it has really interesting activities against Alzheimer's disease, already in a phase 2 trial because this is drug that you know is already safe in humans. We already did that part. All kinds of potential here. We could build a universal vaccine against influenza that would in fact make it possible not to get that shot every year, which oftentimes doesn't work out as well as you'd like, as you found out this past season, but would also be something that could prevent that next influenza pandemic for which we are overdue. All of those things are happening. Precision medicine, a great opportunity now to really try a completely different direction. Show me slide 12, if you would, which basically is driving a lot of this effort because the cost of determining your complete genome sequence, which used to be $100 million, is now down only a couple of thousand, and that's going to continue to drop. Just opening up all these potentials. Brain research, the opportunity to figure out how those 86 billion neurons in your brain are doing what they're doing. We have technology opportunities to figure that out with all kinds of consequences for autism and schizophrenia. So here you have the opportunity. It's the craziest thing. That science has never been more full of promise. And yet, if you're an investigator out there trying to get funded by the NIH, your chances are worse than they've been in 50 years. Now, I get it that we have to be sure we're spending the dollars wisely that we do receive. And one of my goals this year is to be sure we have a plan for stewardship, making sure that there are reforms necessary, that we act upon those, and I'm glad to talk more about that. And I do very much appreciate the support of members of the Congress, like the guy sitting to my right, who is a phenomenal contributor to something called the Common Fund, which we use now as our venture capital space and has freed us up to do some very high risk but very useful things. But the main problem, setting all that aside, is simply that this engine is running on way too little fuel. And we are at, I think, a critical moment, particularly for young scientists who are beginning to lose heart that there's a path for them. And over the course of the last few years, we've seen them get older and older before they're able to get their first grant. Used to be 36. First time you get a grant at NIH, average now, age 42. That means we are keeping people in a holding pattern that is way, way too long for what you'd like to see. Our workforce tends to be more on the emeritus side than on the young whippersnapper side, and we need a lot more youth and energy. So all of these things can be addressed, but there is no magic if we continue this downward slide. And I'm hoping that at this meeting, as Margaret has said, all of us will walk out of here with the determination to make that case. It is so compelling. whether it's because you are looking for cures for disease, whether you're looking for reductions in our healthcare costs, whether you're looking for economic growth in the United States, whether you're looking for our American competitiveness to be maintained, on any one of those points, this is a slam dunk of a case, and yet it is a case that's not been getting very far for 12 years. Let's turn that corner.
Thank you, Francis. So you've heard it here from our Fox Power Player of the Week. You guys have your charge. I'm going to turn to another power player, and that is Mike Milken. Mike, you have been talking about these issues almost as an oracle of telling us that we needed to prioritize this work, this investment for a long time. You also have a personal stake in this in terms of a day when you were given some news that greatly impacted the future of your life. I mean, can you give us some of your perspectives, Mike, on the issues that have been put forward thus far?
Thank you, Margaret. First, I think we need a foundation. And that foundation is that every life is a precious life. It's priceless. But as Bob pointed out, we've mixed the philanthropist here and these 11 different themes. And it's not just the philanthropist, the activist patient today. It's understanding economic growth also. It's an economic argument. More than 50% of all economic growth in the last 200 years can be traced to advances in medical research and public health. The fastest growing parts of the world economy have occurred when we've solved medical problems. In this century, the fastest growing part of the world economy is sub-Saharan Africa. The problem solved to a great degree is preventing AIDS to go from the mother to the child. And today we've reduced that rate from 95% to 2%. Life expectancy in one generation has doubled in the sub-Saharan area. And when we reflect on the whole world, when Margaret talked about this as a humanity issue, obviously the greatest achievement of mankind has been in only a little more than 100 years, the extension of life. It took 4 million years of human evolution to extend life 11 years. In the last 114, we've extended the average lifespan by 40 years. The next question this panel has raised is, does it make a difference whether this occurs in the United States or some other country? There's been many advances in medical research that have occurred in different countries, Switzerland, Japan, Australia, etc., over time. But the greatest infrastructure and the world's leading infrastructure today exists in the United States. Those countries that are committed to investments in bioscience will lead the world in this century. And it's not just medical. It's air, it's water, it's agriculture, it's defense, it's energy. Each one of these plays off. And so in the United States today, we still have 8 of the 20 leading centers of bioscience in our universities. But 5 are in the UK today because of their focus. During difficult times, they increased their investment in bioscience, not decreased it. And as Francis has pointed out, China has committed $300 billion to bioscience, $50 billion a year, for the next 6 years in their latest programs. And this will change the course of history. Today, they're throughout America recruiting those that were born in China, asking them to come back to China, and offering as much as $50 million for their laboratories to encourage them to return to China to do their work in China. The country that has the greatest future medical health challenges is China. They recognize it, and by having a 5-year plan and then a 10-year plan, have devoted their focus to this area. Francis has touched on another very important element here, and that element is the young scientist. If you study Nobel Prize winners throughout all of history, you will find that most Nobel Prize winners have been given a Nobel Prize for within 5 years of being in school. Generally, under 33 were their ideas. They might have won it at 65, but those ideas occurred in their 20s and 30s. And the lack of a continuing commitment to investment in the future of our scientists causes them, one, to go to other countries, but two, to pick other fields.
Right.
One of the calls to action we're going to ask for at this conference from our philanthropy group that is here. Many of the major funders of our universities in this country are at this conference. And we're going to be focused on them, one, on the importance of this venture research, but two, to think about how they allocate their funding to these universities, to focus more on funding young scientists, those in their 30s who've spent 15 years getting their PhDs, their MDs, their residencies, their internships, their fellowships, and continuing their careers. So we're going to be very focused on, you'll see, many of the chancellors of universities and presidents are here. But we're out to convince them that the best investment they can make is in their young scientists. Thanks, Margaret.
So clearly the cavalry is coming, Mike. I appreciate that. So you're already laying down your marker of what you're going to do, what your takeaway is. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about your perspective now that you're here in California, where there is a very vibrant life sciences community? How do you see the interplay between some of the issues in a state like California, the federal level, the international level that Mike was just talking about?
Sure. So the California Life Sciences Association is an association of 750 life sciences organizations, including not only commercial organizations, but also service providers, universities, premier research institutions here in California. Mike just talked about the U.S. leadership. We're proud to say here in California, we are really the most vibrant, most successful life sciences cluster in the world. You're talking about 270,000 direct jobs and many multiples of that in terms of indirect jobs, 27.4 billion in salaries and wages, 22.2 billion in exports. So this is really an extraordinary place to live and work if you are in the life sciences. All that being said, the spectrum of organizations involved in our association really helps to bring out, in many ways, the fragility of the life sciences sector as well. Some of our companies are one person, two people, 3 people. They are truly scientists with ideas, scientists who are trying to learn how to set up a business, how to get funding, how to make connections with universities, how to make connections with patient groups, and get these ideas into the innovation engine that is California. And so part of our work at California Life Sciences Association is advocacy at the state, federal, and local level. A great deal of our work is just supporting that innovation ecosystem, and I mean getting entrepreneurs into a room and teaching them how to make that pitch to those who can help them. With that in mind, I think we can divide our major advocacy interests into 3 broad buckets: research funding, the regulatory environment, and the reimbursement system. Without going into details, Margaret, on any of those 3 things, I want to just bring out something that I know you've worked on a great deal, and something that we work on here a lot in California, and that is informing the patient. I think the voice of the informed patient is really the key to so many of these life sciences advocacy issues. It's one thing for me to say it. With all respect, it's one thing for Bob to say it. It's one thing even for Dr. Collins, who's been involved for so many years in cutting-edge life sciences research. Mike, you have been a patient. To hear from patients who understand the complexities of the life sciences sector about what really needs to happen to keep this engine of innovation moving forward, I think is really the key.
Thank you, Sarah. So, Congressman, when patients come to your office on Capitol Hill, does that make a difference? And how has that changed sort of the views around medical research? And then I would love it if you could talk a little bit about Bob's sort of thesis at the beginning. How can we take this rubber band ball and make it a little less complex? Because I think, as we were speaking over the last couple of days, nobody said I would like to get elected to Congress so that I can stand in the way of important things like biomedical research, right? I mean, everyone wants to be part of this progress, and I think we're going to solve that in this panel. So, help us with that, Congressman, and some perspectives.
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here, especially with Mr. Milken. The next time I do a town hall meeting, I want him with me, and instead of Googling it when I get a question, I'll just Milken it. I don't know of any issue that he's not very well informed on. He's truly a visionary, and to be a part of this conference at the beginning is, to me, just a real high honor. I want to thank y'all. Before I answer the question, I'm going to poll the audience. If you're a United States citizen, I know this is a world conference, so not everybody here is a U.S. citizen, but if you're a U.S. citizen, I want to see a show of hands of everybody in the audience that's had at least a 30-minute one-on-one conversation with your congressman. Well, y'all are a little bit above average.
Yeah.
Which is, you should be, or you wouldn't be invited to this conference, right? The first thing you need to know about how Congress sets priorities, especially in the House, there are 435 House members. We're elected on a 2-year term, and last night I was at a dinner with the CEO of Chevron, and he talked about Chevron investing in these long-term projects that took 20 and 30 years with a short-term market perspective in terms of evaluation by the stakeholders. Well, that's the perfect example of the House of Representatives. We're dealing with how do you fund NIH over a 30-year period when our next re-election is 18 months away. Mm-hmm. And if you don't think it's precarious, ask Eric Cantor. He was the majority leader, probably set to be speaker. He got beat in a Republican primary by somebody who nobody had heard of 6 months before. So most congressmen, first priority is to continue to be a congressman. 2/3 of the House is in their 3rd term or less. So we tend to think of this institution that's always there, but in fact it's churning. And so on the list of top 10 things a congressman in the House is concerned about, biomedical research or medical research or NIH funding may be a top 10 priority for 3 or 4 out of 435. Maybe. Now, in my case, when I was the chairman of the Energy Committee, Energy and Commerce, which has jurisdiction over NIH, the predecessor to Dr. Collins, Dr. Elias Zerhouni, came to see me, and he had a vision. And he convinced me that we should act on it. And that became the NIH Reauthorization Act of 2006. One of your audience members, Dr. Andrew von Eschenbach, had a very similar vision, and he came to see me about cancer research. So Congress reacts to things that have to be done. And if you look at the overall federal budget, we're going to spend in the neighborhood of $4 trillion this year. We're going to take in the neighborhood of $3.5 trillion. So that's a $400 billion shortfall. If you assume that each budget line item is a relative. You're a big family, okay? In the congressional budget, you know, the biggest family member is Social Security, 700 to 800 billion. You're going to take care of Social Security. Then the next biggest family member is the defense budget. It's about $800 billion. You're going to take care of that. And you have Medicare and Medicaid, which are combined around 600 to 700 billion. You're going to take care of that. Now you add those up. Oh, and the stepchild, interest on the debt. That's about 200 billion. So you got you're taking in, say, 3.5 trillion. You know, and you've already added up the relatives that have to be taken care of. The NIH is a third cousin.
Yeah.
Okay? 30 billion. Now the good news is that they're not NASA, which is 15 billion. You could be worse, you know. So how do we take care of NIH when we're still borrowing $400 billion? So what you do is, what did we spend last year? Let's take what we spent last year, and then we'll add a little to it. Now that's not just for NIH. That's for everything. Okay? So then you get to the, how does a patient, somebody comes in your office, a mother who has a child who's autistic, that mother thinks that that child is autistic because that child took a vaccination when that child was 3 years old and had a negative reaction. Now, Dr. Collins doesn't believe that.
No, data is so strongly denies
but that mother believes that, and then she brings 10 other mothers to your town hall meeting in Arlington, Texas. You got to act on that. You've got to act on that. And so there are so many disease-specific advocacy groups. At some point this spring, there will be over 100 requests in my office alone for each of those advocacy groups to spend 30 minutes with me. And every one of them comes in, and it's not, how do we balance the budget? How do we set priorities? It's, what are you going to do to fund my disease group? Whether it's Alzheimer's or lung disease or there are 30 different cancer groups. So the common fund that Dr. Collins talked about was Dr. Zerhouni's idea to give the director some discretion to really set priorities.
It's been a great thing.
But I just have to ask a question. You know, coming from outside of Washington, when you go to Washington, everybody lives in the bubble of Washington. And the thing that strikes me that is just perverse is that people are dictated to by the Congressional Budget Office. And there's so much evidence of the economic impact of investments that why can't we change the way the CBO dictates our future to say, we're not going to live with that. We're going to allow dynamic scoring for prevention and wellness, so we invest in things that will lower the future cost. Mm-hmm. We know that the consequences of not investing in neuroscience and cancer are going to cause this economy to be so much weaker in the future. Can't we fight the Congressional Budget Office and change it?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So, all right, we already have another action item here.
That's a great idea, and the House has done that. Talk to your friends in the Senate.
Well, we will.
Right.
Then.
We did it about 2 months ago.
We have a strategy for that. And his name is Ward Tripp Cassells. And Ward was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer about 15 years ago. And Ward was the heart doctor for both Bush presidents, one of the world's leading doctors in Texas. He had 3 young kids, and he began to enter into many of our new clinical trials. And he lived for 11 years, and 10 of those years in good health. So when you talk about scoring and the CBOE, we need to understand how the CBO scores. So what did Ward Tripp Cassells accomplish in those 11 years that his life was extended by these drugs? Well, first they added up all the costs. So extending his life had a cost associated with it. What they didn't count for is anything he did during that period of time. So what did he do? Well, he had 2 tours of duty in Iraq. He headed up the U.S. medical efforts in Iraq. He had 1 tour of duty in Afghanistan and headed up the U.S. medical efforts in Afghanistan and took his chemotherapy while he was heading up those efforts. He founded 2 biotech companies that today employ thousands of people. And then he went into the Department of Defense full-time and became Assistant Deputy Director of the Department of Defense.
Making us all feel pretty inadequate.
Okay, then he became in charge of the health of everyone in the military. And then when we had a problem in Walter Reed, he was assigned to clean up Walter Reed. Yeah, that's right. And his children, who were very young, had a father for 11 more years. And so in not having a memory of their dad, when they were 3 or 4 or 6, lived with their father, and his oldest child was off to college when his father passed away. Now, Joe, we score that as 0 for society of what he accomplished in those 11 years. And millions of people will benefit from those clinical trials that he was on. And so we're going to try to run a short piece on 1 human being to try to really start thinking about that. As Francis pointed out, the reduction in cancer deaths is worth $500 billion a year.
For every 1%.
Only thing I would say here, Bob, is Faster Cures is not going to wait around 12 years to delay Alzheimer's onset. Okay, so that's going to happen a lot faster.
We have a session today that's going to be talking about investment.
Right, so I think the issue here we want to leave you with, among many of them you're about to hear, is 1, talk to your leaders in Congress. So Joe, let me tell you what we have done. We have funded the School of
Talk to every member of Congress.
Well, we've brought up a little reserves here. So we funded, you might be aware of the Milken Institute, a new school of public health. A Milken Institute School of Public Health at George Washington University. It's located on its campus, the World Bank. Next door is the State Department, the American Medical Association, the World Health Organization. The White House is 5 blocks. The office is 2 blocks, etc. And we now have 1,200 graduate students.
Wow.
Starting in September, 2 graduate students will be assigned to every member in Congress.
Get ready, here they come.
2 will be assigned to every man in the Senate. And then we're going to have a couple hundred.
Are they going to be in our offices, or are they just going to be assigned?
They'll be in your offices constantly. So we are
helping you. So I need to put a desk, and we need to give them a desk.
Put more in the Senate, it sounds like. We need them there.
Well, we have 2 for every senator also. So, and I think in 2 for every cabinet official. So this is our goal, and that was the reason for it. This is going to be the center, and there's no more aggressive advocate than a patient who's been diagnosed with a life-threatening disease, or a relative, or a very interested student. We did a study, we do many studies at the Milken Institute. When do you have the most free time in your life? Answer, college student.
Really?
You cannot identify what you do 20 hours a week. Well,
we know what they're doing.
We're going to identify what they're doing.
You have the Facebook statistics. What is it? 500 million Facebook visits? So we need to translate that into medical research in terms of the digital meeting medical research.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you've heard on this panel, if you ever read that book, A Tale of Two Cities, these are the best of times and these are the worst of times. These are the best of times because we can sequence your genome in an hour, and the cost will eventually be $100 or some odd dollars. We can sequence your biome. We can know what you eat and how it's changing your body, and you can change it in 2 weeks. Immunology is with us, And as Francis pointed out, we've learned that drugs that did not work for what they were originally expected to work for are now working for something else. And whether it's AZT, or whether it's Rogan, or whether it's Viagra, but more important, whether it's thalidomide that had a very negative effect because it was given to women early in their pregnancies, has been a godsend for many cancers and other areas. And so this is with us today. These are the best of times. We can solve these problems. We just need the courage and the funding.
Bob, do you want to talk a little bit about the thalidomide example that just was put up? I mean, in terms of I think a theme you're hearing is maybe our backs against the wall, but this is a group of survivors and fighters. I think that this industry is a fighting industry. We've seen dramatic things happening in the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, the one reason why I am as optimistic as I am about our ability to actually deal with these issues is...
And Bob, we want to congratulate you on your stock performance, because it isn't just your optimism, it's your shareholders.
No, but I really am struck by how important and how opportune the timing is today. Whether, we're talking about the CBO, et cetera, but Congress is, as individuals, incredibly supportive of recognizing the economic benefit, the benefit to people of biomedical research, and whether that's in academic medicine or direct government activity or small and large corporations, it's recognized. And so I think we have a positive to start with there. I think the economic crisis that we had in 08, 09 has actually made all of us recognize that integrated and collaborative solutions are essential to success in dealing with the opportunities and the challenges we have, so that we're poised now to benefit from increased funding. We've now put more money into small companies. The life sciences industry from venture capital last year was really at an all-time high. So the marketplace senses the scientific potential that we have out there. Information technology is finally coming into healthcare to dramatically change outcomes and value proposition and ultimately cost. We have all of the philanthropy is positioned to be an important part of it. We now need to make the case and deliver it. And I think that where 15 years ago, Celgene was stuck by itself and no one else in the world wanted anything to do with what we do, and today we took that risk and turned a drug that was you were prohibited from dealing with, and we took the only people who wouldn't take that risk, and then we were able to parlay that into investments in other areas of real fundamental research to produce a very exciting and promising pipeline. And today, we believe our future is dependent on being the best partner in the world, whether that is with academic medicine or with small companies or large companies. That is vital to our success, and it's as vital to the success of the entire system.
I think that's a theme that we have witnessed at Faster Cures in our history, is this collaborative spirit, this idea that everybody can add something to the table, whether it's the patient, data, voice, energy, story, the science, the companies, the federal leadership. This is a moment in time where there is synergy, I think, unlike any that we've ever witnessed before. Francis and then Sarah?
Totally agree with that. One of the things we're trying to do is to figure out even more creative ways to work together. We have this program now called the Accelerating Medicines Partnership, which is an unprecedented way for private and public funded scientists to sit around the same table, design a very bold program to try to find answers for diseases that clearly need better steps forward. In this case, Alzheimer's disease, type 2 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus. And around that table are some of the real brain trust from both academia and from the no less than 10 companies that have decided to sign up for this. And they share the cost 50-50 between NIH-funded research and what companies are willing to kick in. And all the data is made available to anybody who's interested in looking at it, because this is pre-competitive, but it is empowering to the whole enterprise. I don't think we could have imagined doing that a few years ago. And it's a very exciting model. It's only been going on for about a year. I think another thing, and maybe this is, I'm worried about Congressman Barton and all these people coming to his office saying, you got to work on my disease. There's a theme here that's emerging that I think many of us in science kind of take for granted, but I don't think it's gotten out there the way it should. that the answer to Alzheimer's disease may well not come from Alzheimer's disease research. It may come from some other area where they hit upon something, immunology perhaps, or cancer, that you realize, oh, that's the missing piece. That's what we didn't know about. So the worst thing I think a disease advocate could do is to say, you've just got to work on funding things that are precisely focused on my disease and let everything else go.
You tell them that.
Well, I'm telling some of them. They're here.
We're putting it
some
on
of the others are watching. So, and I want to empower you to be able to say that to them as well.
I'll just, hold on. I'm going to get Dr. Collins.
Whatever you need. Because the success of this enterprise, the whole ecosystem, is that we have to have this very diverse portfolio. If you fail to invest in basic science, including things that don't have any obvious connection to disease at all, then we're really sunk. Because 10 or 20 years from now, those are the discoveries that are going to result in the big breakthroughs. If we hadn't invested the way that we did 20 years ago in studying viruses, we would not have been in the place now where the Ebola outbreak has pretty much been laid into a much more possible place in West Africa with the vaccine trials that are going on. If we hadn't invested in this crazy business of bacteria who actually have their own viruses that nobody seemed to think was all that relevant to human disease, we would not have discovered the most exciting ability to edit genomes that the world has ever seen, something called CRISPR-Cas, which has revolutionized everything we're doing in almost every disease. We might lead, in fact, to a cure for sickle cell anemia, all coming out of this very strange, what most people would have thought, backwater. So the diversity of the portfolio is critical. And I think many disease advocates are beginning to get that, but we do need to do a better job of explaining why.
Sarah, do you think the energy that we're seeing, particularly on Capitol Hill, around things like the 21st Century Cures initiative, do you think that that's helping galvanize, I think, this entire ecosystem to realize that we do need to work together, there are problems we can solve, there can be legislative approaches? Are you seeing everybody starting to kind of line up together in a way you haven't before?
Absolutely. So the 21st Century Cures Initiative has been really just an extraordinary opportunity in Washington to talk about important issues around accelerating medical research. A huge amount of credit to Representatives Upton and DeGette for leading that charge. Representative Barton just told us that there would be a new draft coming out very shortly. The contents of the initial draft were very exciting to us, looking at ways to help NIH to further research in terms of removing some of the challenges currently faced, not just funding, but also around simple things, travel being extraordinarily restricted by the NIH budget situation, the grant-making process. All of this discussion in Washington, we certainly hope that it leads to a 21st century bill. If not, we all know in the healthcare sector that the reauthorization of the Prescription Drug User Fee Act is coming up, and there is inevitably a very important discussion around accelerating medical research in the context of that reauthorization, and so undoubtedly some of the issues will flow into that discussion. Margaret, I did not want to have a panel about accelerating medical research without mentioning precision medicine.
Yes.
And certainly Dr. Collins is an expert on the federal initiative. I wanted to mention Governor Brown's initiative here at the state level. It is only $3 million. We are very grateful for that $3 million. It will be used both to develop an assessment of the resources available for advancing precision medicine in California, about $600,000 there, $2.4 million for 2 demonstration projects focused on particular therapeutic areas. I think all of us in California are looking at this as a great step forward to shaping a future initiative that would be many multiples, probably getting more into the $200 million range, would begin to capture the extraordinary promise of precision medicine, particularly here in California, where you have all of the companies at the cutting edge of digital health, so digital health convergence and wearables and so forth. Really capturing that innovation is an extraordinary opportunity for us all.
So we'll come back to the precision medicine piece. I want to make sure that Francis can talk about it. Bob, you had a point.
Yeah, on the 21st Century Cures, I hope that we all advocate forcefully for the support of it, and I don't want to diminish its impact and importance, and I don't want to look passed it, but I'm going to anyway. I think that it is so fundamental we get that passed to show that we can actually take action and eliminate some friction in the system, to take steps that really embrace some of the important principles. And I think that, to me, the really enduring legacy of that legislation is going to be the fact we can get things done and then really begin to tackle the even tougher issues that we have to face to make the kind of investments that we need to do to really fundamentally deal with the issues that we've been talking about these last 45 minutes.
I think that's absolutely critical. I think the energy that the 21st Century Cures process has brought to the entire ecosystem has been very powerful. I think it has given everybody a sense of hope that there can be bipartisan collaboration. I keep telling Chairman Upton and Congressman DeGette that we need to bottle up that energy. When those two are together, there is sort of a yin and a yang where they remind us, I think, of what we know Washington is capable of, and I'm certain that Congressman Barton, you are going to be helping to lead that charge in terms of trying to get that passed, and some of the small stuff and the big stuff. The small stuff is not insubstantial. For folks in the audience, the NIH, the FDA, they're under some duress in terms of some of the logistical details, travel to scientific meetings, scrutiny and approval. These are no-brainer things. This is low-hanging fruit that we have to work on.
Well, let me give you a quick summary of how the 21st century thing is, legislation has come about. 3 years ago, I went to Chairman Upton. I'm now the Chairman Emeritus, so I'm one of those emerituses. And I said, we really need to think long run. We did the NIH reform bill in 2006. We need to take a look at it, and I think we need to review how we're doing medical research, and if we can get a bigger bang for the buck. And Fred was very positive. He said, sure, run it by the majority leader. So I went to Eric Cantor. I went into Eric's office and I said, I've been approved to set up a task force to bring together leading experts around the country and to some extent the world to focus on how we can do medical research better. And he said, you need to meet Michael Milken. First thing he said. True story. And so anyway, we put together a group of experts. I called Dr. von Eschenbach and Dr. Zerhouni and Governor Leavitt, and they came to Washington and on their own time, their own dime, and we started brainstorming and we began to get ideas. I took those to Chairman Upton, and he got really excited about it, and he decided to make it his legislative priority. So he folded that task force into a bigger group, working group. He got Dr. Collins involved, he got the FDA involved, Janet Woodcock. I'm sorry, I apologize. The result is this is a bill. We put out a discussion draft. We're about to put out another draft. It's going to pass in some shape or form in this Congress, and it'll be a one-day, one-page story, not even on the top of the fold, but it will be a real legacy issue for Chairman Upton, and it'll be one of the bright spots in this Congress. You look back 10 years from now, but it started because a few members, and I don't pat myself on the back much, but this is one that I brought it to Fred. Fred said, check it with Eric. And we decided to look long range. And now we've got the whole country involved. And there's going to be lots of tugging and hauling because everybody's for doing the right thing after you've been taken care of. And that's what the amendment process, what do you prioritize, what gets in the bill, what's not in the bill, what do you have to offer as an amendment, what is the Senate going to do, what's the President going to do. But with the good people and the advocacy groups, the great visionaries, there'll be a bill signing ceremony in the White House sometime in the next year or so. You'll be there. Probably you'll be there. Hopefully I'll be there.
Congressman, we're all going to do some, as you said, tugging and hauling. And this will
That's
become,
a Texas term.
I love it. This will become much more than a small little blip in the news cycle, because I think that there is a revolution happening in terms of patient engagement. Apple recently launched a research app, and in less than 24 hours had tens of thousands of people signing up. People want to engage on these issues. Mike, when you presented to the committee, the 21st Century Cures Roundtable, you came at it from the angle that was very personal and said you were one of the luckiest people in that room to be there because modern science and medicine had really profoundly evolved and impacted your life. You wanted to say something about the 21st Century Cures.
I think you look for things that could change the world. So every one of us lands at a new airport someplace in another country and says, boy, why couldn't our airports be like that? And the bottom line is it's easier to build than to rebuild. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to go to sub-Saharan Africa where there were no wire lines, they bypassed those. They just went straight to mobile and smartphones. And they adopted them because no one even knew what a wire line was. And so here's what we know today. We know our medical system was built over hundreds of years and patched together and how we hold data, et cetera. And we know it's not going to be the system of the future.
That's true.
Just why you can be in the middle of sub-Saharan Africa and get a better signal than you can in Beverly Hills, California. Okay, they're not burdened by the past. And we're going to have to change. And the 21st Century Cures is the first superhighway for us to change medicine, patient records, care, et cetera, Margaret. And so this is going to affect every single human being on the planet. How many of us have loved ones diagnosed with a life-threatening disease or a friend? We have to find a way to allow science to move at the speed it can move, and that's what this is all about.
And Mike, I think to your point about the airports, if we can create the airports that you're talking about in places like Asia, I was just in Indonesia, and in Jakarta, every 5 feet before you get to your gate, you can have a foot massage with these very high-tech seats. I barely I got to my flight because I kept saying, well, I want to try that one, I want to try that one. So why are we prioritizing foot massages, but not advancements in cures for people like my neighbor who has triple-negative breast cancer, 2 children under the age of 15? Those are the priorities, and I think that that's what you are hearing in this panel is that the time has come for us to, we can have nice foot massages, but let's take care of really important problems.
And if you look at leadership, and there's been a change in leadership on both the Democrats and the Republican side. 10 new governors all had background of managing businesses, managing organizations. Thousands of people were elected into office. Not everyone has the courage, vision, or dedication to our country that Congressman Barton has. And we can't thank you enough for your service to our country. But if you want to look at the location in the world that's going to have the most number of passengers landing of any city in the world, it will be Dubai. And at 2 in the morning, you can see the ruler of Dubai in the airport, making sure that it's less than 30 minutes from when you land to when you're out of that airport, no matter where you've come from in the world. I doubt if we've seen a lot of leaders of many countries in the airport at night trying to make sure that its service is at the highest level. And this is what we need. We have a much more important airport here. We have the world's airport. And there's many scientists and leaders such as Patrick Soon-Shiong who will be on the next panel with us, or Andy von Eschenbach, et cetera. We just need to give them the roadmap so they can move as fast as possible. And that's what Barton, our Congressman Barton, has been talking about.
Yeah.
So Francis, we are nearing the end of our panel, and I gave you all an assignment, which is that each of you will take a piece of the action, so to speak. You're all going to take away an assignment. You've taken on many assignments. You've been a gene hunter. You trained as a physician and became a scientist to solve some of these problems, and you've been doing such a yeoman's job we want to take some of the pressure off of you and own some of this responsibility. But what's one thing that you want to take away that you're going to go forward as the director of the NIH to try to work on that we've been discussing?
Well, I think the airport analogy is a good one, and I think research as we've done it in the past is not necessarily the right way to do research in the future, and we have to be really bold and creative about that. So I'm actually going to get on a red eye tonight in order to get back to NIH for an intense experience talking about how to design this precision medicine initiative. And this is going to be a very high personal priority over the next few months to be sure that we make the most of just what Mike was talking about, this coalescence of opportunities with electronic health records becoming a reality and being useful with a lot of work, mind you, for research purposes, with, as we've talked about, increasing interest on the part of patients to not just be patients, but to be participants in research and to help design studies that they're going to get results from, but they're also going to give information that will help others. That is growing rapidly. With the ability to do genomic analysis at profoundly low cost compared to where we were a few years ago, and with the mobile health applications, which are bursting with potential from places like Apple, which are going to give us the chance in real time to monitor what's happening to people's physiology, their environmental exposures. Our goal is to put together, very soon, a cohort in the United States of 1 million or more individuals who volunteer to take part in this enterprise and to build a long-term foundation for all kinds of research questions to be answered. By having this kind of highly engaged set of participants, we could find out in the real world what really are the factors that play out in health and disease and what interventions are successful in maintaining health or better monitoring and treating chronic illness. We've not had that before. We've had a terribly inefficient system where you want to run a clinical trial, well, you start from scratch and you spend a lot of time and a lot of money finally building up your design and getting people enrolled, oftentimes longer than you think. And then when you're done, you tear the whole thing down. We can't afford to do that anymore, and we don't have to do that anymore. So I'm carrying away from this motivation to think about research in the most forward-looking way, not just doing things the way we used to. But, of course, all of this depends upon getting that support behind the effort, both in terms of changing our legislative authorization issues, which is what 21st Century Cures is doing, but also turning this corner on the resources, without which none of these things are going to happen at the rate that they could. We will lose the enthusiasm of our most important resource, which is the young scientists. That's priority number one. I wish I could walk away and say, I'll take care of that, but that's up to all of us.
All right, we got that. So Mike, clearly Francis is in the airport, maybe at 2 in the morning. So he's handling that. Bob, what do you want to take away from this?
Well, I'm going back home and more energized to just do what we're supposed to do, is to, with our company, to maximize the potential that we have to deal with the research and the ability for us to have an increasing positive impact on patients. So that's our first and foremost job. But what strikes me personally, I think I could need to be more engaged in, is really helping provide with Mike and others and other institutions that I work with, the straw man for the advocacy that we need to really be most effective and more effective than we've been. And that includes helping Congressman Barton to ensure the alliances that we have with patient groups are more strategic and more focused, so we actually don't work at cross purposes in terms of advocacy. So I think we need to find a way to step back, re-examine the positions we need to take, and ensure that we've got strong support so that we can have impact with our advocacy more effectively.
Fantastic. Sarah?
Telling the story of value. I'm already motivated to do that, and really seconding what Bob has said. I think an association like ours, our charge is to really clarify and help others to clarify the tremendous return that medical research can bring, not just in terms of patient lives, quality of life, length of life. These are our real goals, but in order to enter into the political discussion, we have to confront the realities that we need to really help everybody to understand the economic return, the salaries, the wages, the exports, and the economic activity. And so that's, I think, our charge.
Fantastic. Congressman?
Well, I'll go back and tell Chairman Upton that there's a lot of support for his bill. And, you know, it's his vision. It's something he's worked very hard on, and he's now ready to move it. As I said, the draft's going to be out today or tomorrow. We're going to have a hearing on it Thursday. And then I would encourage the audience to get involved with this. A lot of you raised your hand that you knew your congressman, you'd talk to him. Congress listens to the people we know. We listen more closely to those we know most closely. So keep that up. And, you know, this is a bipartisan effort. We mentioned Diane DeGette from Colorado, but you have Frank Pallone from New Jersey, Lois Capps from California on the Democratic side that's working on this. Michael Burgess from Texas on our side, Tim Murphy from Pennsylvania, Joe Pitts, the subcommittee chairman. And then we've got to work with the Senate. But I give Chairman Upton all the credit for making this a top priority. And I give a lot of people in this room, including Michael Milliken, the credit for making us make it a priority. So we're going to get this done. We're going to help Dr. Collins. We're going to give you more authority. We're going to give you more flexibility. And then we're going to work with our friends in the industry and the advocacy community to make America even better than it is. And when all is said and done, this is still a country that can do it. And we will have better health and better results because of some of the things that we're talking about on this stage today.
Thank you. Mike, you've done enough in your lifetime that many would rest on their laurels. You have provided the opportunity, I think, for all of us to think differently about these issues. And you know, in your philanthropy, you have leveraged the power of individual philanthropy and foundation philanthropy at key moments in time when it makes a difference, whether we're talking about immunotherapy or other issues. So many would give you a pass, but you know, since I know that you don't ever really stop, I want to let you have the final word in terms of what you're going to take away and then a charge to the audience.
Well, Margaret, that call from you on a friend with breast cancer, I try to talk to anywhere from 10 to 15 people a week who've just been diagnosed or have had a reoccurrence. It keeps your mind focused. When are you the most focused? Generally when you've first been diagnosed with a life-threatening disease or you've had a reoccurrence. You've thought you solved it, but it's back. And so I kind of divide this journey for me into two parts. The first 22 and a half years as a donor, motivating young scientists, but really not personally spending the time, but really using the dollars, and then going to dinners, etc. And the last 22 and a half years, actively involved. And so the message I would leave you with is get involved. This isn't something that you can leave to the sidelines. And as Congressman Barton told you, we've tried large groups. In 1995, we had the first ever cancer summit in Washington. It moved the ball, and it fundamentally changed cancer research. In 1998, with the help of many of you, we brought 500,000 people to Washington and around the country, which eventually led within 30 days to the signing of the doubling of the NIH budget, tripling of the NCI budget. And in 2012, we brought them to the airport, 1,200 of our leaders, including the majority leader in the House, the majority leader in the Senate. We brought them to the NIH for the very first time that was ever opened. And early last year, for the first time ever, we brought them to the Center for Disease Control, which opened its doors to a couple hundred people. Get involved, see yourself. These are the best of times because it's quite possible there's a solution for a life-threatening disease that you have that there is no known solution today if you would accelerate it and if you would find a different approach. But you can't get approach. I discovered early in the 70s, my first time I ever failed was saving my own father's life, that I could not move science along fast enough to solve the problem of melanoma. If he would have lived today, we have a solution for his problems. And so get involved. It's not just writing checks. It's using your personal talents, influence, etc. And that's why we're going to give a call and action, maybe not wanted by all university and presidents and chancellors, but we're going to give a call to action to their donors to look at redirecting or directing specifically to young scientists at those universities their contributions.
Thank you, Mike. You know, Mike has given a couple of talks recently profiling kind of the journey of the American dream, and I really think that what we're talking about is another chapter in that American dream, and the call to arms that you just gave to the audience, to the conference, beyond, I think is very relevant to that American dream, which is the power of ingenuity, the power of ideas, the power of integrating different voices, and the power of action. So I want to leave the audience with my message to you, which is, you know, join us at Faster Cures. We have plenty of opportunities for you to stay engaged, be informed, and please don't be passive bystanders. And I think the power of relationships, which Mike was just speaking about with patients who are directly impacted, makes an enormous difference. And I think that we are in a time, we've all witnessed it, we all know stories where you know, people's lives are at stake and things can change in a matter of days, weeks, and we all want to be at the finish line. As we've seen for many diseases, hepatitis C, HIV/AIDS, many cancers, cystic fibrosis, we have a long way to go, but we also need to celebrate the accomplishments and the iterative nature of all of this. So welcome to the 18th Global Conference. Go forth and conquer. I warned you about the crowded hallways. Stay in your lane, get to your next panel, engage, and really have an outstanding time. Please do your part for biomedical research, as our panelists have done. Thank you.